Welcome, everyone, to the third session in Topic 7, which is Effective Communication Strategies for Community Enterprise Development. This concluding session in this topic will be more focused on the evaluation of communication strategies. And at the end of this session, the idea isn't that you would become an expert in the process of evaluation, but more so to understand the importance of evaluating a communication strategy, what you can take away from it, and how you can improve your communication in order to convey the message of your community enterprise better. For example, if you still don't work in a community enterprise, this session could still be important as it will help you understand the ways in which your communication could be understood, the ways in which you could change your strategy when it comes to creating a better impact or spreading the impact of your community enterprise better. To introduce ourselves, I'm Harshita, and I'm from the Accreditation Council for Entrepreneurial and Engaged Universities, based here in Munster in Germany. And together with my colleague Avencia Vilona, we will further explore this session, which the focus is to understand why developing an effective communication strategy for community enterprise development is crucial in order to foster better engagement, to promote collaboration. And this kind of communication lays the groundwork for better, sustainable, and socially sustainable growth of a community enterprise. The learning objectives for this session would be that the participants in the course will be equipped with the knowledge and the skills needed to develop, implement, and evaluate effective communication strategies. And the idea is that this would ultimately contribute to the success and positive impact in their endeavors, and a positive strategy to convey the impact of their endeavors. Very briefly in this session, we will go over what has already been covered in the previous sessions, which is a recap of what an effective communication strategy should consist of, what are the elements of evaluating a communication strategy, what is the importance of evaluating, and finally, while this is slightly not off topic, but um, a little far away from the idea of evaluation, this is what is culturally appropriate communication, and finally, just a few recommendations for an effective communication strategy. Okay, so what is an effective communication strategy? Since we've already gone over this, I will be brief in this session, but the first one is to define clear objectives. And the idea is that you should define your objectives very clearly about what you aim to achieve through your communication strategy. And examples could be that you're trying to build awareness or trying to start an awareness campaign for the outcomes of your or for the work of your community enterprise. Your objective could be to encourage participation in your community enterprise or to attract investors or to foster collaborations, or it could be to promote the impact of the enterprise on the community. So it's important, for example, you could have multiple of these objectives, but it's important to identify what it is that you're trying to achieve through the strategy that you develop. The second aspect is to identify the target audience, right? To identify the key stakeholders and target for your community enterprise. And this might include community members, members of other local organizations, government agencies, potential investors, customers, or even other media outlets who communicate what your community enterprise does. The third one is to craft a compelling message. Why is this important? To highlight the unique selling point and the positive impact of your enterprise on the community. And so the idea is that you need to develop a clear, concise, and a compelling message that conveys both the purpose, the values, and the benefits of your enterprise. And so it's important to tailor a message that resonates with what we have identified previously, which is the target audience, and which is in line with your own objective of what and why you're trying to communicate, right? And the next one is to choose appropriate communication channels to reach your target audience effectively. And this could be a combination of traditional channels such as press releases, community events, the print media, but together with trending digital communication channels, right? For example, and of course, this varies based on your own situation, your own local context, but to identify whether LinkedIn or Facebook posts or even WhatsApp messages might be the right solution in order for you to attract more customers or engage better with the community that you're trying to reach. And so it's important to consider the preferences and the accessibility of your target audience when you're choosing these channels. The next one is to engage in two-way communication. What does this mean, right? Effective communication is not just about broadcasting messages, but also actively engaging in two-way communication. So this is that you need to understand the importance of encouraging feedback, questions, suggestions from your community, from your stakeholders, your customers. All of these mechanisms could only help the work of your community enterprise grow stronger when they're more in line with the direct needs of the community and their perception and their perception of the importance of the work that is being done by the community enterprise. And the next one is to empower ambassadors. And who do we mean by this, right? When you identify and empower community ambassadors who can advocate for the enterprise and help disseminate its message better, you could have created a very powerful starting point. For example, I have worked in community enterprises in India when the enterprise was trying to do very meaningful work. But when they identified members from the community who were well respected and well regarded for their opinions and their stance or political stand on things, it helped the work of the community enterprise gain trust and gain respect from the community, right? And again, this varies in different contexts, but it could be a strategy to empower somebody who is already an ambassador and so that they could advocate for your message and communicate what your enterprise aims to do. The next one is to regularly monitor the impact and effectiveness of your communication strategy. And this could be, and we'll come to more details about this, whether that means analyzing metrics such as the reach, the engagement, website traffic, the media coverage, and maybe just community feedback. And you can use this data to refine your own approach and identify areas for improvement and adapt your strategy accordingly. And finally, all of these elements are in order so that you can adapt to changing needs, right? You can continuously assess the changing needs of your strategy, of what your community needs, and the trends and preferences within the community and adjust your communication strategy accordingly. So it's important to stay updated with emerging communication technologies and tools so that your strategies continues to remain relevant and impactful, right? And remember that an effective communication strategy is a dynamic process. It requires ongoing evaluation, ongoing adaptation, and engagement with the community because that is what is at the center of your focus when you're working or developing a community enterprise, right? So it's important to foster transparent and inclusive communication so that you can build trust and build stronger relationships and drive the success of your community enterprise. Okay, now what is evaluating a communication strategy and why is it important? So evaluating a communication strategy designed for specifically for community enterprise development involves assessing its effectiveness in achieving the intended goals and the intended impact. And in this, now what we would do is to define these evaluation objectives, right? Um, one of the key aspects is to specify different aspects of communication strategy to assess. And some of these aspects are to measure the reach and the engagement of your communication, to evaluate the effectiveness of the message, and so these two come together, right? To evaluate the effectiveness of your message and to assess stakeholder perception. So what are the stakeholders' understanding of what you intend to communicate? Often there's a gap between what you think you're saying, what you think you're communicating, and what you're conveying through your, whether it's your social media channels or in whatever form you choose to disseminate the work of your community enterprise. But what is being understood of that could in some cases be far from what you intended. So again, it's a technique that you could use to use the SMART evaluation indicators, right? Um, and I wouldn't go into further detail right now, but we'll come to this. The next one could be to measure behavioral change as a result of your communication strategy, right? Okay, so perhaps this is an idea some of you are already familiar with, which is to identify key performance indicators, right? And to align these KPIs with the evaluation objectives. And some of these are, again, it's up to you what you choose to use and what you choose, which indicators make the most sense in your context. But these are just some ways and some indicators which could be helpful when you choose to evaluate. One of these could be website traffic, if that's what you're trying to attract, right? If you're trying to attract more newer customers and if you're trying to attract people who are new to your enterprise. So website traffic could be one of the indicators. And the other could be social media engagement metrics, whether that's the number of likes, the shares, the comments, the followers. And otherwise, it could be media coverage in which you're um, looking to see in what ways is your work, is your communication being mentioned in other articles, in other interviews, and maybe you could collaborate with other members from other organizations, interview them, and use these platforms to connect, to collaborate further, and improve the visibility of your own community enterprise. Another could be, and this could be when you're trying to gain feedback from stakeholders, from other community members, is to design survey responses through the form of satisfaction surveys or feedback surveys. There are many free to use tools such as Paperform, such as Google Forms, which you can design an appropriate survey based on your own needs. And you could regularly use these. Since it's free, it's easy to use. And to gain feedback, to see what is being perceived of your work, what is being understood by it, what people might want to see better, right? And when, for example, you have big events, the number of people and the number of participants who attend and the feedback they give could be very valuable in evaluating your own strategy, rethinking the way you communicate and rethinking perhaps maybe if there's something to change in the way that the community enterprise is being run. And again, when it comes to the changes in stakeholder behavior and perception, of course, this takes longer, and it's more of a long-term process, right? It takes longer to identify behavioral change, and it often could be very time-consuming. But again, regular interviews, surveys could keep you informed with the progress of both the work of your community enterprise and the ways in which your message is being received. And the next is to utilize these various data sources, right, which you have mentioned in the previous slide. And you could analyze this further. And this could be done through creating data visualization reports. And these reports could, again, be further shared through your own communication channels so that people see visually what is being communicated, right? And people, for example, if you have received great feedback on the work done that could have been explored in a public event, and if you had feedback surveys through this event, you could use this, create a visual data report, and share this further, right? Because then it's easier to see, it's easier to understand what is being done, and in what ways your work is being received. This could be a technique to further get your community involved. The most important aspect of creating an evaluation strategy is not just to receive feedback, but to learn from both the successes and the challenges of having a community enterprise, right? And so it's important to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of your communication strategy. Again, this could be done through the feedback forms, or even if it's just oral interviews from people you work with and from members of the community. And you could use these insights to refine and enhance future communication efforts. You could treat evaluation results as a very valuable learning opportunity and continuously adapt your communication strategy based on these findings, right? And one mechanism to do this, a very simple way to do this, is a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths, the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats? And the idea is to keep this in mind and continuously use these techniques to build and adapt your communication strategy. And if this results in changes that you might need to do in community enterprise, it can be seen nothing but as a positive. And finally, we come to why it's important to evaluate a communication strategy. The first, of course, is to measure the effectiveness, whether your communication is effective at all, right? And then to identify the strengths, to identify the weaknesses, to optimize resource allocation. What does this mean? For example, you could be spending a lot of resources in in having people communicate very actively, very vocally about certain issues and trying to garner support, but maybe this is not being well received. Maybe the efforts of your social media strategy are more effective, right? And then you can adjust accordingly your own internal resources from the community enterprise. And the next is to, of course, it's important as a community enterprise to figure out who it is that you're addressing and what it is that you're trying to achieve through your communication so that you can better enhance and target and tailor your message. And this a kind of evaluation allows you to demonstrate your impact. It allows you to demonstrate accountability, especially if it is to attract funding and attract investors, right? And finally, this is more of an internal and could be in some ways a personal strategy, which is that it can foster learning and continuous improvement. Finally, we come to the topic of culturally appropriate communication, right? So, what is culturally appropriate communication? You need to understand that when you're using a certain communication style, you need to be aware of the impact of culture. In some cultures, it might be seen as rude to continuously hold eye contact. In some others, it could be seen as disrespectful if you don't maintain eye contact. So, to understand the community that you're working with, and the next step is to recognize that even though you're working with a community, you need to recognize that it comprises of individuals with different cultural backgrounds, different preferences, and different communication styles. And overall, the main idea is that don't assume that your message has been understood. You need to check, you need to evaluate, you need to follow up with what is the perception of what you are trying to convey, right? And the next one is when you're dealing with a community and often have community events, community participation, be aware of non-verbal communication. And this comes together with understanding your own position in the community enterprise and understanding the power dynamics within the community and where you stand. And this is, of course, more of a reflective process, but just something that you could be open to. And finally, here are a few recommendations for an effective communication strategy. The first is that it should be explored. And the evaluation of a communication strategy can lead to the emergence of new ideas and ensure that the participating communities feel heard. And open dialogue, open discussion with relevant stakeholders, other community members, these should be promoted in order to facilitate more meaningful discussion in the development of your own community enterprise. And the next is to find ways to communicate with community leaders and participating communities to discuss the challenges and find options for like figuring out common solutions. And the next would be to regularly assess the communication strategy and also try to build collaboration with other community-based organization, as this can stimulate collective action and this promotes sustainable people-oriented community development projects, which we assume that is the main aim of having a community enterprise. Thank you.